Hi everyone and welcome to another retrospective review, and this time I'm looking at Fans Toys Spotter, which is their version of a masterpiece scaled reflector. Now you may wonder why I'm looking at this figure. Obviously it was originally released in 2015, so I've missed the boat somewhat, but it's because I recently read something that said it was possibly due for an imminent reissue, and what with the bugs getting re-released recently, I thought that actually sounded like it was plausible. And I know there are a lot of people out there who are, they have a reflector-shaped hole in their collection, so to speak, and would probably welcome this guy on their shelf, the other options being what they are. So I thought I'd take a look, and if anything, it's just a fun little retrospective review anyway, something that I've not really looked at in much detail since I bought it. So I thought I'd share it with you, and hopefully I will actually genuinely try and keep this one a bit shorter, as I'm trying to do with the retrospective reviews, so it shouldn't be another hour-long marathon as my unboxing reviews are. But anyway, this is obviously the box, speaking of boxes, and it's got some nice artwork on it. Obviously the usual stylised Fans Toys artwork, not really representative of what the bots look like entirely, but it looks quite nice, and I'll give you a quick 360 on it. On the back, obviously, there you have the pictures of the bots themselves in both robot and alt mode, and the character bio is there, which is sort of based on the original G1 bio. But I'll speak to that a little bit later in the review. And as we move around, you can see that it's the same on this side, so not really a whole lot more to show you there. One other thing I will bring in at this portion is the manual, because it seems as good a time as any, and that is again very similar to the artwork. Stylistically, you have the three bots on the front there, and then it's a full colour manual with the transformation instructions, which they aren't too difficult to follow, but it's quite a tricky transformation anyway, but it does a reasonable job. And you also have some information about the accessories, etc. on the back. So anyway, enough of me chatting about the cardboard and the paper. Let me just nip off to the side, and I will bring in the robots themselves and we can take a quick look. Okay, and here we are back with the bots themselves, and I think first impressions when I look at them all together like this, they're a pretty good approximation of the G1 Toon aesthetic. They're not spot on. This is older Fans Toys, obviously, you're talking 5-6 years ago now, and Fans Toys still aren't 100% Toon anyway. But these, I believe, are probably the most accurate in terms of bot mode of the three sets that are available. I think I'm including the Make Toys visualizers and the KFC Opticlones in this, and I'll speak to why I think that's the case in a second. But yeah, I mean, obviously, Reflector, the character, doesn't, is not terribly exciting visually because it's three almost identical bots. So you know very much what you're getting. There's not a lot to speak about in terms of individual bits and pieces. You've seen one, you've seen them all. But I think this does a pretty good job of capturing the cartoon colours, at least in terms of the deco on the arms and the chest piece colour there being more accurate than some of the others, and this two-tone here. I mean, the design not entirely correct, the foot piece and things like that. I'll try and put some image up on the screen so you can compare, so you're not just listening to me talk about it without any visual reference. But it's pretty close in terms of some aspects, and then a little bit out on others. But by and large, I still think it's the best available representation. Now, the head sculpts, for example, I think the Make Toys possibly do a better job with that, and maybe the face sculpts as well. But these are still pretty good. They're not a million miles away. And yeah, again, KFC I think arguably has slightly more accurate colours, but and even maybe you could argue the design in some areas, but in others it's wildly out. And also I think the scale of the other two sets is incorrect, the KFC being too tall and the Make Toys being too short. So these are pretty much hit the sweet spot. Again, maybe it's fraction too tall, but you can even compensate for that by collapsing the legs a little bit and not quite extending them fully to see this. So if you think they're a little bit too tall, you can make them you know, a fraction smaller, which is quite a nice touch as well. I will give you a quick look at the various angles on the bots as well, because they look identical for the most part, but they're not entirely. Obviously, the most obvious thing here, I guess they were never named in the show, were they? But going back to the old G1 toy, which was something I owned but not officially. It's a bit of a sidebar here, so I'm going to go on a bit of a tangent. When I was a kid, I never really had much love for this character in the show because it wasn't in the comic, and I grew up the comic was my first love, and obviously the toys as well. But the comic was what I really read for Transformers lore, and the animated series again because the character models were the same as the comic, and you know the voice acting was great. You know I enjoyed that as well. This character I never really knew much about because he was only in the toon, and I never even knew it had a toy. Really, and I eventually, years later, learned that I inadvertently had it as a kid, and I never put two and two together. So I had it was either the microchange, the original microchange version, or a KO of the microchange, or it wasn't a KO of the official Transformers version because it didn't have Decepticon faction symbols, it didn't have Reflector written on it, but it was either an official or a KO of the microchange line of three robots that did combine into a camera, but they were very different. And again, I'll see if I can put a picture up on the screen somewhere so you can see what they look like. But I did own that, and I still do somewhere. I mean, it's seen much better days now. I think it's largely in bits, you know, arms broken off, that sort of thing. But I think I've still got most of the component parts, and it's a nice little curio. And the three robots there were called, I believe, Spectro, Spyglass, and Viewfinder. And that I guess would equate to Spectro, Spyglass, and Viewfinder with these guys, although they were never named in the toon. But yeah, it was just strange as how as a kid I didn't put two and two together, that, hey, these guys, three robots that transform into a camera, are this thing that I've got. But yeah, I never did. I just assumed that because it didn't have Transformers branding, it was just another one of those robots that I had, you know, like my Valkyrie, which my Gundam Valkyrie, which obviously looked a lot like Jetfire, and I used as a stand-in, and my Grandstand Amigatron or whatever it was called, which was like my grey Amiga Supreme, you know, and my grey Shockwave. So just one of those off-brand Transformers. I obviously never knew that those robots came first. So it's quite interesting to learn about it when I was doing a bit of research for this review. I actually looked into the history of the original release of Reflector, in that it obviously wasn't included in the original toy line. It was a later, I think real late 84, maybe 85, I think possibly really late in 84. So it wasn't in the first wave, which is why he disappeared from the cartoon after season 1 largely. I think he may have shown up in like certain background scenes as like a disposable robot, you know, to be blasted away by the Autobots, or you know, just general cannon fodder. And I think he might have even been in the movie in the background as well. But yeah, by and large, his on-screen appearances were limited after the first sort of season. But yeah, anyway, I never put two and two together, and it was quite interesting to find out about that history. So yeah, anyway, sorry, I've gone on a massive tangent there, as I often do, and this is why my reviews always end up so long, because I always think of something else to say off topic. Anyway, so yeah, these other three bots, I would say, you know, they're never named in the show. They're just known collectively as Reflector, and in the show they were three robots that had a unimind. They spoke in unison, and there was I think they had the ability to clone themselves, because every now and again you'd have multiple versions of them in the same scene, and not just, you know, obviously that happened with animation errors from time to time, but I think this was more intentional. They, you know, there was a scene, for example, in one episode where they got knocked back together and merged into one robot, and I think the original idea from what I've read was that they could clone themselves, and as long as one copy existed, it was never truly destroyed. He could kind of replicate, a bit like Duplicate from Invincible, and I'm sure many other heroes as well, and villains. But yeah, I kind of like that idea, and I wish I'd known more about that as a kid. But of course, he really didn't have much explanation in the series or anywhere else, so I didn't really know much about him. But yeah, I do like that idea that he is a singular consciousness that can clone himself, and he needs at least 3 copies in order to form his alt mode. It's fairly useless alt mode, it has to be said. But yeah, it's quite a neat concept that was never really explored. But anyway, let's take a look at either Spectre or Spyglass, depending on what you want to call him. And from the back, it's quite good that we've got 2 the same, because I can show you the front and back at the same time, can't I? So yeah, from the back here, you can see you have a pretty minimal backpack. It's quite clean. You can obviously see some of the robots, like the alt mode bits hanging off the back, and these are very loose. It has to be said. That's one complaint I have, is that these pins are very loose, and that's something that I'll talk about as we go on. Actually, that some things are very loose, some things are way too tight. But yeah, it's a nice clean mode. It's quite sleek. The characters in the animation obviously are a little bit bulkier. In fact, not quite as svelte around the midriff. But I like it. I think the proportions look pretty good, and I quite like the colours. And yeah, I mean, you get a good look there. And I've obviously pre-applied some faction symbols because I've had these for a while now, since 2018, in fact. And I got them second hand. I bought them. I think they cost me 160 quid, which at the time I was really, offended by, because I was like, well, they cost like 85 when they were new. And yeah, now, can you imagine getting one Fans Toys figure of this scale for 160 quid, let alone 3? Times have certainly changed, not necessarily for the better. Anyway, let's have a look at Viewfinder as well. Obviously, he's very different on the front. As I said, he's got the shutter in his chest, which is quite toon accurate. And if I move him round, you can see that his backpack is slightly different, and that's obviously to accommodate the transformation. But yeah, by and large, they're very similar, as you can see. I mean, he doesn't have a couple of these pieces hanging off there, but he does have the flaps. Yeah, there's very little difference between them. I think really, because he's the central bot, it's really just these pieces here and this backpack that are different. So yeah, you're basically getting 3 near identical robots for your money, which some people might see as a bit of a rip-off, but that's the character, that's what he is. Again, I think they're pretty good. They look nice, they look the part. It's just, again, Fans Toys going for that not quite hyper toon look, but more that toy toon combo. And as these are a bit older, they're even more so than some of the newer releases. But yeah, as I've said, I still think they're pretty good. So comparing them to what's available elsewhere, I'm glad that I sort of took the extra time and paid the extra money to get a copy of this, because I think I would have been disappointed with the others. As I say, I do like the look of the visualizers, but I hate the colour scheme. If they were done in a more toon accurate colour scheme, I'd really like them. And I think the KFC ones, while they have some nice touches, I just don't like a lot of the design choices, and they are way too tall for my liking. So anyway, that's probably enough for chatting about the robots, for obviously this being a retrospective review and all. So I won't go on too much more. What I'll do is I'll sort of clean it up a little bit, and we'll come back and we'll take a quick look at the articulation of one of the bots, because they're all very similar, so there's no point going through all 3 of them. So just give me a second and I'll be back with a look at the articulation. Okay, and I thought I'd choose the main bot, the central bot, Viewfinder, just to do the articulation checklist, because he's just visually slightly more interesting. Anyway, they've actually got a pretty good range of motion, these guys, and we'll start up with the head, and I'll bring him a little bit closer. Maybe I'll move the camera up slightly so that we can get him a bit closer, and I can point out various bits. So it probably gives you a better look at the head sculpt as well. But the head itself is on a ball, and he can look back a little bit, obviously hindered there by the backpack, which is actually true of all of them. They all, I think, possibly the others have a slightly greater range of motion, but not much at all. He can only look down this far as well, which isn't a great amount, is it? But they can look, side to side. And because they're on a ball joint as well, they do have a little bit of side waggle as well, which is good. moving down here to the arms, we have a 360 at the shoulder, which is nice. It can extend all the way up to the horizontal on the shoulder joint as well. And you also have a bicep swivel there, which is actually quite tight on mine. I found that these arm joints are quite tight in general, actually. You also have a nice deep double jointed elbow there, so you get a good range of motion on that. And on the wrist you have a 360, and as is the norm for figures of this size, or at least back in the day, and still now to be honest, you have just the usual, the old style masterpiece moulded hand, where you have a moulded thumb and then 4 fingers moulded as well. They're not individually articulated or anything like that. One other thing it does, and I'm not entirely sure if this is something that it's designed to do as part of the articulation, because of the transformation, the arms need to move, so they clip in and they move backwards as part of the transformation. But what that does actually give you is a bit of a butterfly joint, because you can see you can unclip that. There's a tab there and it goes in there. So I don't think it's designed to actually do this, but it does give you a good range of motion across. So what I like is it enables you to do that kind of classic reflector looking into the distance pose. So you can have them all lined up in a row, sort of at this angle, sort of looking off like that, which is pretty cool. And again, I don't know really if that is something that's intended, but it's a thing you can do and it looks pretty good, so I make use of it. Let's get his arms up out of the way just to demonstrate the articulation here at the waist. You can pretty much go all the way around. I was just impeded by that hip skirt there at the moment, but you can pretty much do a 360 on it, which is good. So you get a lot of motion out of that. And with the legs, they are also pretty well articulated. You can go all the way out to the side, or you can, if I get the hip skirt up, all the way. So you can go all the way out to the side here on a friction joint, and it's pretty stiff as well. It's not really going anywhere. And you get the usual thigh swivel at the top there for a good range of motion. Now, you don't get a huge amount. I mean, at the front you can get pretty much 90 degrees, or almost 90 degrees, not quite, but you know, as much as you'd really need. Back you don't get too much because of this this butt plate here, and you can untab that, but again, it's not going to be any use because it still hinders it, so it's not really anything you can do. You just don't get much back. However, you do get this single jointed knee here, which gives you that much. But what you also get as well is this transformation joint just here, which separates. And it does look quite unsightly, and it's not really meant for articulation, I'm sure, but it does give you a deeper bend. And it also means that the leg, even if you keep that straight, whereas you'd normally only get about that much, you can get back to there with that transformation joint. So you can actually get the leg all the way back if you don't mind a big cut in the knee there, or well, the thigh I should say. So it's there, it does that, but I don't think it's really designed for it, but it's quite nice that it does do it. What else have we got? There's not a huge amount left on him, to be honest. One thing I will say, actually, you probably can't see it, is that the hip skirts are really not great. They're really, I talked earlier about things being too loose. Well, here's a good example. So here's something that's way too loose, that flops around like hell. The pin's really loose, and both pins, in fact, there, that pin in there and the pin on the back, and it doesn't actually tab into the back of the leg. And the pins in the hip skirts are very tight. So this will probably be the last time. I've never really used the hip skirts because I know they're just going to snap if I keep using them. And this is one of the looser ones. And the amount of pressure you have to put on it in order to move it is really quite concerning. As you can see, I'm holding my breath, and I'm going to hold it even more when I go back in, when I do the alt mode transformation, which I've never done before. So yeah, that means it limits how much you can realistically get out of him in terms of. I mean, you're not going to want to do like a full splits, are you? Because that's just not something that most people do in a normal pose, and you can still get a reasonable amount of sort of A stance out of it without, but it's just a bit, you know, it's a bit annoying that you can't actually utilize the full leg split because the hip skirts are so tight and the stress marks on them are already visible after not many, after not much manipulation. So I'd be scared to continue to do that. And the pins are so small that, you know, they're in there. There's no way that I could even get any silicone spray in there. There's just nowhere for it to go. I mean, I suppose I could try and put it in there, but it's just not going to have enough space to get in and do anything. And that's normally how I would resolve something like this. It's pretty useful silicone spray. But yeah, I think in this case, you're just kind of stuck with having to use a minimal A stance or leg spread or whatever you want to call it. Anyway, so that aside, the final bits of articulation, you've got a bit of toe tilt there, which is part of the transformation. And again, see, this is on a pin, but it's quite loose. The thing you actually want to be stiff, this, because it's got die cast in the feet, is loose. And then the thing that you want to be loose is way too stiff. You know, draw your own conclusions from that. It also has a bit of ankle rocker there. You get quite a good on that, although you could never use that much because you can't splay the legs enough to use it. But it's there should you want it. So you're going to get enough out of it in an A stance. If I put him back a bit, you'll be able to see. So yeah, you can get a decent wide A stance, although it starts to look a bit silly the way it's cut up. There's no real back and forth on that. You get a tiny bit, like a minimal bit, but really not anything that's of any use, to be honest. So yeah, I mean, it's not bad. You get enough, but it is disappointing. Some things are too loose and some things are too tight. And these feet also loosen up over time because not so much actually on this bot, but the others that had that little piece there that you need to manipulate, because they're in that screw, when you turn that piece, it unscrews it. So then the feet get really loose and you've got to tighten them up and everything. But anyway, that's probably enough for the articulation, because I think I've covered all the major stuff. It's got a good range of motion, or you know, especially for a bot of this size. And the other two, as I said, are identical. So there's really nothing that they offer that this one doesn't. Yeah, I think I'm pretty happy. You know, I can get most poses out of it. You know, I'm sure, you know, people will be bemoaning the lack of an ab crunch, but you know, again, what do you expect for the age of this figure? I mean, it's 2015 release. It's long before ab crunches became the norm. So anyway, with that over and done with, what I'm going to do now is take a short break while I grab some of the accessories, and we'll bring them back and we'll take a look at those. So yeah, just give me a second and I'll be right back. Okay, so I'm back now with some of the extras, the extra pieces that you get with him. And first and foremost, I want to talk about this, which is this rather gorgeous little mini reflector camera, which hopefully you can see that it's coming up on this camera. And it's a very show accurate alt mode for the character, and I really like it. Obviously you can see it's more show accurate in some respects, color wise, than the figures are, which you'll see better in alt mode obviously. But yeah, giving you a 360. Obviously it doesn't have the green on the back there, it's a lot flatter, just one colour on the back. But it's, you know, if you remember that scene from More Than Meets the Eye when Thundercracker holds Reflector, this is pretty spot on to that, and it's great. And that's why I really like this, because now I've got the MP 52 Plus Thundercracker. This is a really good option to recreate that scene. So honestly, really lovely little inclusion. Yeah, it's just sometimes silly little things like this are really pleasing, and I just really like the way this looks. And yeah, I'll definitely be using that in my display, although I haven't at the moment, but I definitely will be. Speaking of camera parts, you have this lens here. Now this actually, they've done some good stuff here, because they didn't really ever come with any weapons in the show from memory. I don't remember them ever wielding weapons. So they had to really create some stuff of their own, and they went above and beyond really. So what you can do with this, and I've never done this by the way, so this you forgive me for trying this on camera for the first time. It's probably the worst time to do it, but you can take all of this apart, and they transform into various weapons. And I've probably done that wrong now, but let's just have a look. I'm pretty sure. Yeah, that's right. They combine with other bits, so I'm going to have to show you everything. But anyway, this thing here, for example, this watch me colossally mess this up on camera, but it's effectively gives you a weapon option. Here's what happens when you don't rehearse things ahead of time, and this is supposed to unclip and isn't. Why are you not unclipping? Come on, please do as you're told. Here we go. Right, that's better. Right, that's unclipped now. That's unclipped. That's better. Oh, got one bit going and then the other bit stopped. What are you playing at? I think it's all supposed to go back, and it's not. Yeah, really should have done this ahead of time, shouldn't I? Right, give me a second. I am just going to refer to the instructions and I will be right back, because I clearly should have looked at this before I started showing you guys. Just a second. Okay, and I'm back. Apologies for that. I wasn't actually a million miles away. I just, for some reason, I had a bit of trouble manipulating bits. But anyway, as you can see, it all splits apart. And then you rotate various bits, like the viewfinder rotates up here, this piece rotates back here, you pull out a barrel there, you collapse all of this, and there's a handle in there, and it forms a F-off gun, basically, which is pretty cool. And again, I believe with this, you can take the bots and put the weapon in their hand. I probably need to open that up a little bit. I was trying to... I don't know how you actually get this clasped around this bot, because it's not easy with the way that goes in. Yeah, that's really not easy to get that in there, is it? Well, there you go. I see you have to clasp it around to begin with and then close it up like that. And then there are some tabs on the side of the arms, I see, that will hold it in there. But anyway, you get the idea. It's a BFG. And it's pretty cool. I mean, considering they didn't come with anything in the cartoon, to give them, you know, what is essentially now a giant gun arm with a big viewfinder, I think that looks pretty cool. So yeah, that's a nice addition, and it's a clever use of some of the alt mode parts as well. So speaking of the alt mode parts, obviously here we have a flash for the camera, and this, I believe, separates. I cannot remember if you take one part off the bottom first. Yes, so you take this part off here, and then this separates, and you get a couple of bits with this. As you can see, there's another knife here, or there is a knife here, sorry, which I'd forgotten was in there. But anyway, we'll put this down for a second. That probably gives you a clue as to what these things are. So anyway, what you do with these is you take these camera pieces and you shrink them down like this, and then you take these pieces here, and there's a hole there and a tab here, and you tab them in like that, and then you have on the bot, he's going to be fully loaded, this guy, on the bot you have obviously the hand, and you also have a hole there. If you can see a little notch in the forearm, and there's a tab here that fits in there, like, oh, open that up a little bit, that fits in there like that, and then this is on a little slider as well, so you can adjust it, and then it just fits in the arm like that. And then he has another giant gun, albeit he's a little bit loose in the arm there to hold it, so that's disappointing. Maybe the other one would be better. But yeah, I'll put him like that, because then he's got the two guns, and yeah, he's looking like you wouldn't mess with him, isn't he? There. So yeah, I think it's a really inventive use of extra pieces. You know, quite often you get these accessories and they don't really do much, but here they've actually gone like above and beyond to give you something a little bit extra. Speaking of which, you noticed earlier that this knife fell out. Obviously they never had knives in the show, but it's a really sweet looking knife, and you get 3 of these actually, 1 for each bot, and you can, as you see, it's basically, this is a scabbard for it, and what you can do, and I've got to remember which leg this needs to go on. I think this is right. Is this right? There are 2 on the legs. There are there's a notch there and there's a notch there, and you have to get them aligned. There you go, yeah. So they fit on the legs there, and you can have a little knife on his leg there, which is pretty cool. So yeah, these guys, considering they never had any weapons in the toon, they've got a huge arsenal of weaponry when it comes to their sort of masterpiece scaled sort of versions. You can also put another knife in this backpack here. If I can get the orientation correct. I think I had it the wrong way around, or did I? Not entirely sure. No, I had it the right way around, I believe. No, I did have it the wrong way around. That's clever. Put it in the right way, and then yeah, there you go. The odd thing with this though is that I've no idea where this goes, and I haven't been able to find anything on the internet to show me where it goes. It looks like every other reviewer had this problem as well. It doesn't have notches to go anywhere else that I can see. There's nowhere it can stick on the legs or anything like that. And I can't see anywhere that it would naturally go on the backpack. I mean, you've got these tabs here and some notches there, so it looks like potentially it's supposed to go on the back, but they're too big, so they don't fit. They won't friction on or anything, so they don't go on like that. They don't hang on. I mean, I don't think they hang on. And could you hang on like that? I mean, no, you couldn't. It just falls off. It potentially on the butt. No, it doesn't go there either. Really, it's a bit of a mystery. I mean, if anyone does know, has ever figured out where these go, please let me know in the comments, because I would love to know myself. Yeah, I've never seen any reviewer or anyone figure out where these are this piece is supposed to attach. So it's almost like it's storage, but you can't put it anywhere. I mean, you'd think with there being 3 bots, it would make sense that you'd have 2 of these scabbards for the side bots, and then this would be for the main bot. But yeah, that doesn't seem to work. So yeah, please let me know if you're a cleverer, wiser man than me and you figured out how to use this, because I would love to know. Anyway, I'll put this to one side because, as I say, it's just storage. But another thing you do get is a handgun or a pistol. And this is a really nicely sculpted thing. And again, you get 3 of these. They didn't have anything to go from on the show, from what I understand. So this is an original Fans Toys creation. I think it's a really nice looking weapon. And it just fits in, with the usual masterpiece grip, as do the knives. They've got the little, they've got the little tabs on the handles there, and they fit into the grooves in the hand. Yeah, really nice looking weapon. As I say, you get 3 of them along with 3 knives, so you could have all of the bots decked out how you want, or you could have one bot with 2 guns and another with 2 knives, and another bot with huge weapons like this. So you've got a lot of play options if you're so inclined, which I think is really good. Considering this bot was 85 quid when it was released, at least according to the price I'd found on Amiga Lock. It does seem to be what they were selling it for back in 2015 or whenever it came out. It's crazy to think what you get with this, and that there are 3 figures. So anyway, and that's not the end. You also get 3 Energon Cubes, which look slightly different to any that I've seen before. They're sort of most Energon Cubes are kind of squishy plastic or like a lighter pink. These are quite purple in colour, and they're a bit smaller than usual. They're all right, yeah. They're not brilliant, they're not amazing, but they do a job. And if you've got some others with your Insecticons or whatever, or any of the other figures that come with them, then you start to build up a little collection, couldn't you? And you can get them all different colours and sizes. I know that anyway. So, but anyway, it's nice that they've sort of given these as well. It's like a little extra thing that they didn't have to do. So it's pretty good. And last but not least, for accessories, I'll just, I think I've already shown as best I can. I'll try lifting this up a little bit, excuse the fingers. But if you take a look there's the head sculpt. You can see the face sculpt, sorry, not the head sculpt, but the face sculpt. And it's the stoic face, so I prefer this. I like this face sculpt. I think that's the one that I've settled on for all 3 of them. But you do get 3 options. Now, I don't know if the others really suit the character. I guess you can be the judge, but here hopefully you can see this. I'll move this because it has a tendency to focus on background characters. This is the slight smirking face, which reminds me more of Starscream than Reflector, to be honest. but it's okay. Yeah, again, not too bad. And you get 3 of these, so you could have all 3 bots with the smirk. And you also get a laughing face, which I think is probably the least suitable. I'd much rather have had a dismayed face. I think that would have been better for Reflector, given the number of times he was unceremoniously kicked about in the series. But again, they're all finished quite nicely. That nice metallic red eyes and the silver. Although I would personally have preferred like a grey colour to match the arms, because that's the colour it should be. But again, this is 2015 that we're talking about, and that's just how things were done back then. You had metallic faces, etc. But yeah, so you can have 3 different bots with 3 identical faces, or 3 distinct faces, or mix and match to your heart's content. So it's good options there. And yeah, although I say I would have preferred there to be more of a dismayed face, a stoic face, and a slight smirk, as opposed to this out-and-out laugh. But anyway, that's everything that you get accessories-wise. So what I'm going to do now is something I've never done before, and that is to transform all 3 of the bots and try and combine them into the camera mode. And yeah, I think I'm probably going to need some luck with this from what I've seen, especially given some of the tolerances on this guy just from playing with the robot mode. I'm slightly worried about breakage and things, but yeah, give me a second, and I'm not going to do it on camera just because if it all goes wrong, I don't want you to see or hear a grown man cry, sorry. So give me a second in your time, probably an hour in mine, and I'll be right back with a look at the alt mode. Okay, so we're back with a look at the alt mode, and I had a bit of a mission getting here, if I'm honest. The tolerances on this guy, or these guys, are very tight in certain places, and when I was trying to transform and compress the various bots, I encountered a few issues. One of them had an arm that would not collapse, it just refused, to the point that I thought I was going to break it, so that was a bit of a tense moment trying to get that done. Obviously it went eventually, but nowhere near as easily as the other 2 bots, and indeed the other arm on the same bot. And I also had a problem with the hip skirts. They are ridiculously tight on all 3 bots, to the point when they felt like they were stressing on the very small hinge, and honestly I'm slightly concerned they're going to snap when I go back to robot mode, so fingers crossed that doesn't happen. And another piece that, or pieces that really flummoxed me for a while, were inside this piece on either side here. And what happens is this canopy pops onto another piece here and latches on, clips in, but there are 2 very weird little C-clipped bits. This is a C-clip on a track, and 2 pieces clipped into that, and they popped off, and they were a nightmare to reconnect. I had to jam a tool in to keep the C-clip in place and then pop it back on, and even after I'd done that, the bots would not align properly. So when I tried to sandwich everything together, this piece would not clip on. It took me a little while to figure out that actually somehow the pieces were on the wrong bots. So on either side here we have you know, the right piece was on the left and the left was on the right. So once I swapped those around, more fiddling about, it went in perfect. You know, there's no issue with it at all. So I don't know whether that happened at the factory or whether it was something that the previous owner did. Maybe they came off when he was trying it and he just clipped them back on to whatever he thought was the right one, etc. And then went, I'm never transforming this again. Either way, yeah, it was another little issue, but it's there now, and it all tabs together pretty well. You know, I mean, there are a few gaps, but it's not, you know, terrible by any stretch of the imagination. It's a pretty solid, hefty piece as well, because you've got 3 robots with a bit of die cast on them as well. So it's a nice clunky heavyweight camera. Very obviously 3 robots sandwiched together, as you can see there. You can see the chests of 2 there, and then the feet and legs of the other. It's not a bad looking piece though. You know, I really like the fact that this lens here is cartoon accurate. The rest of the bot, unfortunately, or sorry, the rest of the alt mode is not, the deco, and this is largely, I believe, because they obviously wanted to keep the robot mode more accurate, so some sacrifices, some compromises had to be made. And whereas something like KFC's Opticlones does have a slightly more accurate deco, the lens, the lens and the shutter and a few other bits and pieces are not as accurate, and the bot modes aren't as accurate either. So, you know, you pick and choose what you prioritize, I guess, and they've gone for the bot modes really over the alt. But that's not to say it's really bad. I mean, it's proportionally very accurate. I like that. It's just the front of the camera, the deco isn't really right. But in terms of how it actually looks on screen and how it should look, I mean, I can bring in the small, you know, the mini camera that comes with it, and you can see that proportionally it's actually pretty spot on. It's just that the deco should be this grey with the red stripe. But it's obviously not. But you can see that the sort of lens cap here, the lens is correct. And in the show, he never really had the flash attached. It was more with the two robot heads. So actually, this flash does come off, and so I would probably display it like this if I were going to display it in alt mode, which I probably never will. And you can replicate that with the mini camera as well, which is a nice little touch, I think. So that's how he would have looked, and did indeed look in you know, the episode More Than Meets the Eye, where Thundercracker first uses him to take a picture. And yeah, I really, you know, I like this as a really great accessory. Actually, as I've mentioned before, it's a really good accessory for that reason, that you can use it with Thundercracker, especially now I've got the new MP52 Plus. But yeah, you know, the alt mode itself, it is what it is, and that is to say, not particularly exciting, but it's competent and it holds together well. It's sort of, you know, it feels hefty. So yeah, it's a good looking alt mode, just not a particularly exciting one. But it's nice to have it after all these years. As I said, I wasn't, you know, I didn't really know what Reflector was as a kid. I didn't know what I had on my hands, and obviously the G1 version, or the Micro Change, or the KO, whatever I did have as a kid, that didn't really look anything like this. That piece looks similar, and you know, the heads of the robots were there, but obviously it's very different apart from that. I always thought it was a bit of a curio piece. I didn't realise it was an actual character in Transformers, and didn't even equate it to the version on screen because the camera looks so different. But you know, obviously I've touched on that in the robot mode side of the review. So anyway, that's probably enough about the alt mode, because you know, you've seen it from all angles. There's not really too much more to say, but yeah, it's all right. It's probably a one-time transformation for me. Anyway, what I'll do is I'll get all these back into bot mode, and we'll come back and we'll do some final thoughts. Okay, I'm back with some final thoughts on Spotter, and yeah, by and large, I'm actually quite impressed with this figure, or these figures, I should say. The robot modes I really like. I know they're not 100% toon accurate, and I'm very much a toon guy, but they're the closest we've got at the moment, I think. And I do like the way they look. I'm sure someone could do better if they really tried, but I think these are easily the best of the three available options, and some pretty nice looking bots to boot. And yeah, I think the issues I've got with it really are just around the sort of tolerances. As I mentioned, as you saw in the bot mode section, and more so even in the alt mode review, there are some real issues that came to light as I was playing around with it. So I'm really quite worried or quite concerned about the hip skirts. I can't use them essentially. I hadn't really ever manipulated them before I started doing the review, and particularly when I started doing the transformations, because you need to lift them up all the way to do that, to actually complete the transformations on both sides, on all three bots. I can see quite considerable stress marks on some of them. Like this one, for example, was so tight I thought it was just going to snap. It barely budged. Yeah, it's worrying to the point that I will never transform it and will never do a wide stance on these again. That's a major problem. The floppy bits on the backs of the legs, yeah, that's annoying, but you can kind of live with it when they're stood there. They're not going to flop around unless you're moving it. You can tighten up things like the ankles. The arms that were actually over tight as well. I did have a little mess around with that afterwards when I was transforming them back, and I found that if I loosened the screws, I could they decompressed easier than they compressed. They were then a bit loose on the bicep swivels, so I had to tighten it up again. But it's all little things like that. Nothing massive. Certainly nowhere near as egregious as some figures, that's for sure. Now, your mileage may vary, but all the reviews I saw back in 2015 or 2018 or whenever, I actually started looking at it was about 2018, but they were from around 2015, and everything I've seen subsequently have indicated that these were issues with the test shots that carried over into the retail, which is something that everyone says Fan Toys doesn't do, but clearly they do. So yeah, maybe if they do reissue it, as we're hoping, they will have. They did certain improvements for Coop and various things like that, so hopefully they will have just finessed them a little bit, and people will have a slightly better experience, and who knows, they may give you some other options in terms of face sculpts and things. But anyway, sticking to what we've got here, these are still really nice looking bot modes. I'm really glad to have the character because, or the characters, however you want to look at it, because it does complete my season 1 lineup. Although I had no great affinity for them myself growing up, I do like the fact that I have a complete season 1 Decepticon cast, and it's now very, very nearly toon-centric complete. I will be getting Acoustic Wave tomorrow, I believe, at the time of recording, and then only waiting on the MP52 Plus Skywarp to have a fully toon-centric cast. Well, I guess also the tapes from Robot Paradise as well, most of them anyway. I'm going to keep the Condors from MP13. But anyway, the alt mode on it, it's a camera, what can I say? Getting it there was a bit of an arduous task. Once it was there, it was quite nice, it was quite hefty, it looked the part, although not as cartoon accurate as this, as we've already discussed. But it's a good little option. I do love this little camera, as I've said. I think that's a really great little piece to use with other figures. I don't think it's necessarily worth the trouble to get it into alt mode, particularly with the issues with tolerances, as I've said. But again, it's always your mileage may vary with these things, isn't it? But I really think that as a display piece in bot mode, these three, especially looking at them now, this is just reminding me so much of that season 1 episode, More Than Meets the Eye episode, where they're all kind of stood there with Thundercracker and the Let's Find Out moment, where they take the photo of the truck that they think might be an Autobot, and they're all there, kind of looking off to the horizon with their hands up to their eyes like that. So it's really, really quite nice to see them all like this, and just almost feel like I'm taking them in for the first time, because when I bought them, I pretty much just posed them and forgot about them at the back of my display. But yeah, they actually, I've got a newfound love for them looking at them like this, so I might reorganize my display, to bring them more front and center. But anyway, I promised it would be a bit shorter. It's probably not a lot shorter by the time I've edited it all together. But hopefully you've enjoyed this look at Spotter, this 2021 look at a 2015 figure, which we hope will be getting a re-release fairly soon for all of you people out there who are still hankering for some Reflector action. Anyway, thanks for watching, and hopefully you'll join me on my next full unboxing first impressions review, which, as I said, is likely to be Acoustic Wave probably in the next few days. That will, spoiler alert, will be another very long video, I'm sure. So if you're not into those, then maybe not for you. But hopefully you'll join me anyway. And thank you to all of my recent subscribers. It's really helped, actually. It's great. It's taken me over the 500 subscribers mark. I think I'm up to 509 as of time of recording. And it means I can now do community posts, which is something that I've always wanted to do, because it lets me engage with people, like-minded individuals, etc. And some not quite so like-minded, unfortunately. But still, thanks a lot for anyone who has taken the time to watch this, and I hope you've got something out of it. And thanks always for everyone's support. And yeah, I just hope you enjoyed this, and I will see you next time. Take care, everyone.